Hello, everybody. Craig Beggins here. Welcome back to Real Estate Today. We are missing my brother Jeff today. He's got some appointments he's going to make, but we don't want to leave you hanging in this industry with all the crazy stuff that's going on in it. So, with me today is Mr. Mike Puma, our
What's
brother,
up, everyone?
another mother.
Yeah, happy to be here. We kicked Jeff out. We said we don't need you. Get out of here.
Cool. Well, the industry buzz right now is all about this. But it's not really even a lawsuit. It's a claim that there was collusion between these monster powerhouse real estate companies trying to collude together to ban and say, let's all stick together and price fix and create an antitrust thing because we all want to be punished by the federal government. And a couple home sellers got together and made that allegement. And a couple lawyers got together and said, we think we can make this a class action lawsuit. So they made it sound like these big behemoths. And I mean, let's face it, anywhere real estate is a behemoth. We're 25 to 30% of the real estate market in this country. And not Century 21, but Century 21 plus Coldwell Banker, plus ERA, plus Better Homes and Gardens, plus all the other brands that we own. And then Remax is a close number two. And it's actually kind of proven now they're number two because their settlement was less than ours. So we must be bigger. So Century 21 and Remax said, hey, you guys, if we did something wrong, we'll settle with you. We'll fix our things. Drop us out of your case. And so they did that. So we are free as an Anywhere brand or a Remax brand. And then National Association of Realtors really is taking it on the chin because they don't even earn commissions. They earn our fees. They do quite well.
Yep.
And then a bunch of other bigger powerhouse companies too. So the lawsuit was against all of us, or the complaint, not a lawsuit. It's a civil matter. This wasn't a criminal case. It's a civil matter.
Yeah.
Was heard by a judge and a jury of 8 people. And they came together and they heard testimony from all sides. And the jury decided that it's likely that there was collusion. And that was the thing. And nobody expected it to happen.
Let's break that out a little bit, right? Because collusion, when it comes to real estate, I think is a little confusing. And a lot of the articles and the things that I've seen have tried to really explain or take the approach of like, hey, this is what this means for a real estate agent. This is what it means for a brokerage. This is what it means on the transactional side of things, not necessarily on the consumer side. And I think I was actually talking with a friend of mine, just a normal consumer the other day, and he had kind of heard wind of this, and he was confused by really what it essentially was saying. And the lawsuit was essentially saying that, historically, when a real estate transaction is done, there is a commission, usually 5 to 6%, depending on your market, that is charged to typically the seller, right? Quote unquote, the seller is paying for that commission at closing for the buyer's agent as well as their agent representing them in that transaction. Mm-hmm. The lawsuit has basically said that by doing that, it essentially they are colluding together to have a commission that the seller should not be 100% responsible for. And the seller should not legally have to require or pay a buyer's agent in any way if they don't want to. Right. And NAR has always said that can't be the case. We have to offer compensation. So they sued NAR. And basically, if we're really simplifying this lawsuit down, there's a lot of complexities and intricacies within it. That's essentially, though, the basic principle of this is saying, hey, as a seller, should I be required to offer compensation to the buyer's agent as well as my agent, or should I only be required to have to offer compensation to my agent? And that's really what came out of this, right? And so the answer as of yesterday was no, you don't have to offer buyer side compensation anymore, and you should only have to offer compensation to your agent.
Right. Unless your agent has a marketing plan that's beneficial to you that might want you to pay. Because the challenge is, let's jump into your consumer side for a second.
Yeah.
That's going to leave a lot of consumers without representation.
100%.
And that's dangerous because they're buying in neighborhoods from other states. They're from other states, buying in neighborhoods in different places where the local traditions and laws and everything are different. I mean, I got to explain a CDD to most everybody who's not from Florida. Right?
Well, let's take a step back for even a second with that. Okay. You've been in this business 31 years. You've done over 60,000 transactions.
Right.
On most of our listings, where did the buyer come from? Where did the buyer? How did, as a listing agent, how did I find the buyer that came to buy that property?
But from a cooperating broker from the MLS.
From the MLS. So now
95% of the time. Do we want to
let's
not advertise our listings on that MLS?
exactly, right. So as a seller, my buyer in a majority of this time is coming from the MLS, right? Now,
We're a big
is it in
company.
my best interest to get rid of that and have less people looking in the MLS to buy my property? Yeah, I don't think so, right? That's not in my best interest as a seller. I want the most amount of eyeballs viewing my property. I want the most amount of people trying to sell my property as I possibly can. And so immediately on the surface, right there, I am working in a detriment if I get rid of that, which is essentially what this could potentially result in, right? If I am no longer willing to pay compensation and others follow suit, that means there are far less, to your point, far less buyers who have representation, aka there are far less people searching in the MLS to buy my property. And that is not a good thing for me.
I like this example. My dog escapes from my yard. She's gone for 2 days. I'm freaking out. Am I going to put a wanted poster on one telephone pole down the street with a reward of $20? Or am I going to paper the whole freaking town and put $100 or $200 or $500 reward and put that thing on every telephone pole in the
Yeah,
neighborhood?
you want it everywhere.
I want it everywhere. And that's all we're doing. That's what the MLS technology has enabled us to do. And it's a blessing and a curse. Because now it used to be, and this goes back to way before you were with our company, but when we opened, the MLS came to us in a book, and it was a thick book. I don't have any books on my desk right now. It was like this thick, and it was filled with black and white one photograph of a house with a little description that said 3 bedroom, 2 bath, $67,000 in Magnolia Village, right? And the minute that book was printed, it was outdated because one of those got sold and another one came on the market. And we'd have to deal from that book for a week, right? And there was no MLS computers, none of that. That's how we got the information. So every week the book would come and everyone would come to the office and we'd share the book and see what the new listings were. That's how antiquated it is. Now with technology, and this is what's so super cool and why we spend so much time on the marketing side saying, damn it, your photos better be spot on and beautiful. The order of your photographs is critically important, right? And there's rules by which order they have to be in. But if you put, the front photo has to be the front photo, show what the house looks like. But after that, if the pool's your second best feature, my goodness, put your pool as a second photo. If your kitchen is just to die for, put the kitchen as a second photo. Everything else can be rearranged, and it's a beauty's in the eye of the beholder type of thing. Yeah. And then what happens is there's a marketplace of buyers, and we all know, and this is really a challenge. There's over in excess of 100 million internet leads, right? So there's a whole bunch of people looking at Zillow and Realtor.com and Homes.com and Redfin.com and Century21.com and GlobalBanker.com and all these websites are all shopping on. And how many home sales are going to be this year? In the 4 million
Less
range?
than 5 million.
Less than 5 million and 100 million leads. So the same buyers are looking at the same websites and they're studying, they're seeing all this stuff, right? And on those websites, they lead to the tax records and they know what taxes are. But what they don't know is that Florida's got some really cool property tax benefit laws, right? I'm going to tell you a story with that in a minute. Homestead exemption and the timing of homestead exemption and portability. We just saved a person a ton of money with portability the other day. Just so knowing what the taxes are and being able to explain how the taxes work, that's the good agent's job, right? We know there's taxes. Can you explain how the taxes work? We know there's a CDD. Can you explain what the CDD does? We know there's an HOA. Can you explain what the HOA does? All buyers, they don't know that part, right?
Well, and I think the other side of this is every action has a reaction, right? And the reality is with this change, websites that consumers love, websites that consumers are used to searching on and having their properties on, like Zillow. How does Zillow make its money? Zillow makes its money by taking leads that are buyers and in most cases, trying to qualify them and then sells them to agents and brokerages in that local marketplace, right? Well, if I'm an agent and broker in that local marketplace and you come to sell me a lead that no longer now has any form of guaranteed compensation on it, that value to me is essentially zero until I know what property they're going to buy, right?
Right.
And so if that value is zero, that means I'm willing to pay nothing for it. If I'm willing to pay nothing for it, they don't make any money. If they don't make any money, they go away, right? So now you lose real. Let's just hypothetically say you lose Realtor.com, you lose Zillow, you lose Trulia, you lose all the major engines that operate on this. The MLS is far less because there's not as many buyer's agents. So now that's not a great. So how do I market my property? Well, I better hire an agent that's really good at doing Facebook and Instagram and TikTok marketing, because otherwise there's far less people that are going to see my house. And so it's not like, I know on the surface to some people, if you're, and I mean this in the most respectful way, if you're cheap and you don't want to pay for anything, right, then this seems on the surface like a great thing. Like, hey, well, yeah, I get it. Why am I paying for his, he should be paying for his agent. Well, I get that on the surface, but that's not really how this works, right? At the end of the day, if you go out to eat, do you say, well, the restaurant should be paying my server, I shouldn't have to give them anything? Well, if you're someone who doesn't tip, sure, maybe this is the mindset you have. But for most of us, we realize that that person is still providing me a service that I'm willing to pay for. They're bringing me my food that I want to eat. They're taking care of me. They're making sure my drink stays full. So I'm willing to pay something for that. I'm not mandating that the restaurant that employs them pays entirely for that, right? And it's the same concept here. If I want to sell my house, I have to be willing to pay for somebody to bring me that buyer. And I think in most reasonable people will say, yeah, I would be willing to pay for that. Well, that's all this is, right? At the core of it, that's all this is. This is
It's just
just
a
saying,
service.
hey, when I bring you a qualified buyer who really wants your property, will you be willing to pay me something for that? That's it.
That's it. We're a service business, right? And when you're talking the restaurant comparison, if the server does a good job, you pay him a 20% tip,
Yep.
sometimes more. They do an okay job, you might get a little pissy and pay them 15%. And if they just do a crappy job, I usually pay them 10.
Yeah.
But most always I pay 20 or more, right? They
Yep.
did a good job. I like it. So it's kind of like the same thing we do. But I
Yep.
was thinking, you said something that made me trigger. If you look at the seller side, sellers are not forced to hire a real estate company. They're not. There's for
No,
sale by owners in the marketplace.
a
I
lot of them.
believe the statistic is 95% of home sellers choose on their own volition to hire a listing broker to market their property. Why?
Yep.
Because the listing broker provides a service that the seller doesn't want to pay for. And the listing broker has access to tools that the seller doesn't have.
Yep.
Right? So 95% of the sellers say, I'm willing to pay a commission because I want the service of a real estate brokerage and agent. So the buyers are kind of the same way. What was really interesting in this suit, because I read some of the transcript, was the same sellers that were complaining about paying a buyer's agent went and used a buyer's agent and had the seller pay them when they bought their next house.
Yep.
Digest that one.
Yeah.
That's what my point made.
Well, and not to mention that those that do sell for sale by owner on average sell for 30% less.
Yeah.
When
And an agent brings the buyer, and the seller ends up paying a buyer's broker anyway.
Exactly. But they're doing all this, right? You sell on average for 30% less to save 5 to 6%.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so we're literally stepping over dollars to pick up pennies, and it just doesn't make sense. So, I think at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot that comes from this. This is far from over. There will be appeals. This will drag out as long as they possibly can. And sadly, the only people that really will win at the end of this are the attorneys. But, the reality is we're going to do our best to continue to bring objective points of view as things progress and change. We'll certainly bring you that. I mean, with that all being said, on the agent side of things, there's a lot of really scared agents, understandably, right? There's a lot of agents that have made their living and support their families off of representing buyers, that now all of a sudden that side of the industry looks a little scary, because now I may not be offered compensation. And what happens if my buyer wants to go see 123 Street, and now my only way for me to get paid is either they pay me, and if they can't afford to pay me a commission, now I have to build my commission in the offer, and that makes my offer a little weaker potentially. And so, compared to somebody else who may not have that in there. And so now there's all these things that I have to be considering. With that being said, creates a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. I love when there's fear in the marketplace, because it scares a lot of people away, and it creates this gap of opportunity. And I think if you are an agent that does represent buyers or enjoys the buy side of this business, that side of the business is not gone. It's changing, but it's not gone. And so now, if you are one that can demonstrate your value, if you're one that can truly show that your value is far beyond opening a door for them, is far beyond doing a safe search for them, and is more about, hey, let me make sure that once you find, right, the perfect house, that I'm the one who's going to get it across the finish line. I'm going to handle the complexities of the deal. I'm going to make sure all the terms align with your goals. I'm going to do that side of it, and that's where I specialize, and you can sell that value. You're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
If your value has been, oh, let me get a lead from my broker on a buyer, and then I'll, maybe put them in my car and go tour them around and show them where all the rooms, your value is zero in the new world, right? So that's just something that, you've got to take a hard look in the mirror and figure out what type of agent are you, and what type of agent do you want to be.
Yep. 100%. So in the end, closing, this trial answer has been appealed. Nothing's going to change. Before the lawsuit happened, NAR actually said they would change their policies even before the lawsuit. And those policy changes don't go into effect until mid 2024. So basically, nothing changes for real estate people now. And the changes that come out are more clarification. So a buyer understands or a seller understands. And I will pat ourselves on the back, because years ago, I changed our listing agreement and made it very clear that Mr. Seller, we nowhere in our listing agreement said we charge 6%. It says compensation, seller will pay box 1, 3%, box 2, 3.5%, box 3, 4%, box 4, 5%. And then it says, and buyer authorizes broker to offer box 3%, 4%, 5% to cooperating brokers, right? So tell me where that's price fixing, and we're it's not, right? And it could be that simple. And the seller could say, pay him zero. Okay, pay him zero. But if you pay me zero, I'm on the buyer's agent, and I've got a buyer broker agreement with a buyer, expect my offer to be less to you, Mr. Seller, because you're not putting the 3% commission in your pocket if you're not paying it to me.
Right.
Which begs one more question I think should be talked about. And we mentioned this before this audio. Mike, your house is $450,000. It just sold, and you paid a broker a 3% commission. My house is next door to yours, and I sold mine for $420,000, and I didn't offer any broker compensation. Same house, same neighborhood, same builder. What's an appraiser going to do with that?
It'd be interesting to see.
He's probably gonna knock the value of your house down to adjust it to my comp.
That's what I would think. Yeah.
I would think he's going to do that. So anyway, the point is, don't freak out when Warren Buffett says, when the market is greedy, be fearful. When the market is fearful, be greedy. So what we're going to do as a brokers is we're going to double down on our conversational discussion strategies on how to deal with buyers and how to deal with sellers. And while we have opportunity time to ramp up for the next half of next year goes by, when we're going to have to adopt changes. So there's no big changes for us to mess with now, but we're going to start preparing for those now. So, So we got on that topic. Do you want to?
Your house is currently on the market. If you're currently a buyer, just know that nothing has changed from yesterday. It's
no
exactly
legislation
the
has
same.
changed. No
Everything's
rules
the
have changed.
same. You can't go today and call your agent and say, "Hey, offer them zero." That's you don't do that. Everything is the same. Just know that there may be changes coming, and we'll do our best as they come out to try and explain them and bring you up to date on what's going on, and at least our point of view on them.
Let's tell a real quick story. We got a couple more minutes. Um, we had an agent who just sold a house, and some challenges happened, and I got involved as the broker. And the buyer was super cool. It's a fancy house, $2.5 million house. Um, I didn't want to get into all the details, but it was a cash closing in 7 days. And the value of knowledge that a buyer's broker would have, or the buyer broker in conjunction with the listing broker, collaborating together to create a sale. And I think that's really important because I've worked some big sales and I've worked with some really good agents. And I find it's usually the agents that do the deal because the customers value their opinions and they trust them. So in this case, the listing agent was okay. It wasn't great. But if I asked him for something, he'd get it. And this is a very close knit community. There's 19 homes. They're 50-foot wide lots. They're 5,000 square foot homes. They're on the open bay. And being a broker in this town for a long time, I knew that docks were not allowed because typically a dock has a 25-foot setback from either side of the property line. And these lots are only 50 feet. And I've never seen a dock that's 0 inches wide that can
Yeah.
support a boat. So these neighbors got together and they got permits to put docks right down the center line. So there's a 4-foot wide walkway. 2 feet is owned by this guy, 2 feet so this wide, and they just share and they can walk on the 4-foot thing together, which is cool, and that worked. And then an agent friend of mine who's really good was the president of the HOA and had that all incorporated into HOA docs, and it was all authorized and allowed and had rules and standards.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this particular home seller added um, 3 jet ski docks. This pier's 300 feet long. Added 3 jet ski lifts on it. Well, it clearly says it's allowed to have 2 boat lifts on the dock. And we're going, uh-oh. So I called my broker friend who has nothing to do with this transaction, but since we've collaborated in the past, she was more than happy to share with me what happened. So I was able to go to the title company, which we happen to own, which is nice to have that relationship. Title company got me the docs. I found the Second Amendment. I saw the rules. And the title company had been dealing with the HOA, Community Association Management Director, the board. And we got the board to write us a letter saying that the dock was grandfathered in. And I said, that's not good enough. I know the dock is grandfathered into deed restrictions. I need approval that the dock and the lifts are approved by the HOA. And we got that email yesterday, and the funding happened yesterday, and the closing documents got signed today. So that's just an interesting thing that what happens behind the back. We also found out that the survey, which normally a cash buyer doesn't do, but I kind of forced them to do it, identified probably 4 or 5 different encroachments. It's hard to build a big house on a little narrow lot.
Yeah.
We found 4, I think it was 4 encroachments, and we talked them through, and they became not a big issue. So we accepted the survey it is, and we closed. But that's where the agents got involved. The buyer had an agent, that was me. The seller had an agent, that was somebody else. And then these 2 agents collaborated and brought in a third party who got no benefit from this, but she just helped out and really made everything work together. And a title company that was being directed by the agents to do what needs to be done. So really, it's a
And
complicated situation. And
that's the value of representation. That's the value of having agents, right? Because at the same time, if you remove one or both of the agents out of that transaction, what happens from a legal perspective in the future,
no,
right?
there's
I
a
mean, that
fight.
becomes a legal nightmare. It becomes lawsuit heavy. It becomes insane, right? And it's not because you were trying to
Maybe
do
that's
anything
why,
wrong.
Mike.
It's
The
because they just
lawyers
don't
got
know.
us out, so there'll be more lawsuits in real estate transactions.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
The legal fees are more than the commission.
the reality is most issues that happen in real estate is not because someone was trying to deceive somebody else. It's honestly because they didn't know,
No, they're
right?
ignorant.
Because they didn't have an agent there to guide them through it, and they didn't know what they needed to disclose. They didn't know what they needed to ask. They didn't know what they needed to look for, right? And it's crazy. I would, if I got arrested tomorrow, I wouldn't try and represent myself in court,
Nope.
right? Not because I'm stupid, but because I don't know the law in and out, right? I'd want somebody who does
Mhm.
representing me. And it's got to be the same approach when you're looking to buy or sell. So, just that just demonstrates the value of having some agent that can guide you through it and make sure that you're disclosing everything, asking the right questions, and really taking you through the entire transaction. And if that's not worth a couple percent to you, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, pay a lawyer a couple 20 grand and
Yeah,
see how it works. All right.
exactly.
That's enough for today. I think we'll go through the lawsuit as it grows. It's probably going to dissipate until the mid part of next year. In the meantime, brokers and agents should be sharpening their skills, getting better at delivering their value, having meaningful conversations, and become really good at explaining the processes rather than just expecting people to follow the rules that were never really made.